Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The corridors of the drifting trade station Rust Bucket 7 smelled of ozone and decay. Not the clean, antiseptic decay of abandoned places, but the fetid, living rot of a dying organism still desperately clinging to life. Emergency lights flickered in seizure-inducing patterns, casting long, dancing shadows over corroded metal walls. The distant hum of failing life support systems created a discordant symphony with the groans of overstressed support beams. The station itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with metallic sighs as atmospheric pressure fluctuated between sectors. Riley Crawford moved with practiced efficiency through the maintenance shaft of Sector 7, his fingers dancing over the complex network of hydraulic lines with a surgeon's precision. The intricate modifications he was implementing would increase the system's efficiency by nearly 20%. Though he'd only report a 5% improvement to Vorgan, the rest would remain his secret. Survival on Rust Bucket 7 meant being valuable enough to keep, but not exceptional enough to exploit. "Come on, you stubborn bastard," he muttered, feeling the coupling finally give way under his custom hydrospanner. The tool was one of his few possessions, modified beyond recognition from its original specifications. Like its owner, it appeared unremarkable, but contained hidden capabilities. In Vorgan's carefully stratified world, there were three classes of inhabitants: his inner circle of trusted thugs who enjoyed whatever luxuries the station could provide, the tolerated workforce of technicians, traders, and service personnel who kept operations running, and at the bottom the merchandise, slaves, indentured servants, and prisoners treated as walking inventory. Riley had survived 3 years in the middle caste by cultivating a reputation for competence without excellence. Show too little skill, and you'd be jettisoned with the waste. Show too much, and Vorgan would either exploit you until you broke or sell you to the highest bidder. The memory came unbidden, as it often did when his hands were busy and his mind wandered. The burning orbital platform. The screams of his squad through the comm channel. The weight of the corporate directive. Extraction deemed financially non-viable. All units disengage and return to base. His commander had followed orders. Riley hadn't. He'd borrowed a shuttle, managed to save 3 of the 7 left behind. For his trouble, Helix Corporation had court-martialed him for destruction of company property. Their term for the damaged shuttle, not the 4 soldiers he'd failed to reach in time. Since then, he drifted, taking jobs that paid in cash and asked no questions, fighting the growing emptiness inside him with the simplicity of machinery. Machines didn't abandon their own. The sudden sound of heavy boots stomping down the corridor made Riley instinctively hunch lower over his work. Years of survival instinct had taught him to make himself invisible when trouble approached. And trouble on Rust Bucket 7 always wore the face of its master. "Move, you worthless cargo!" The voice boomed through the corridor, making even the experienced workers flinch and press closer to the walls. Vorgan, the station's slaver captain, stormed into the cargo bay. His massive frame filled the doorway before he strode in, dragging someone behind him. Riley kept his head down, focusing intently on the hydraulic line, but his peripheral vision caught the disturbance. A flash of blue struggling against Vorgan's iron grip. "This is what happens when my property tries to run," Vorgan spat, his voice like gravel churning in an industrial crusher. He addressed the half-dozen crew members present in the bay, clearly intending this to be a public demonstration. "When it forgets its place." With a powerful shove, he pushed his captive forward into the center of the bay. A girl stumbled across the metal grating, but caught herself before falling. Riley's breath caught in his throat. Her skin was a shade of blue that reminded him of the deep oceans on his homeworld. Worlds and lifetimes away. A Kalan. The Kalan were known throughout the galaxy as warrior intellectuals, their culture built on a foundation of physical discipline and philosophical wisdom. Before the imperial conquest of their homeworld 5 years ago, they had been diplomats, scientists, and when necessary, formidable soldiers. Now they were refugees, resistance fighters, or, like this one, captives. She wore the tattered remains of what had once been a political dissident's uniform. The symbol of resistance, a stylized hand breaking a chain, was still visible on her sleeve, though someone had tried to tear it away. Despite her obvious mistreatment, she stood tall, her head held high, shoulders back in defiance. a spark of something dangerous and beautiful in the oppressive gloom of the cargo bay. "Look at what we have here," Vorgan announced loudly, grabbing the Kaelin by her hair and yanking her head back to expose her face to everyone present. "A revolutionary, a freedom fighter." He spat the words like curses. "Thought she could pass messages to the resistance right under my nose?" The other workers in the bay studiously looked away, focusing on their task with sudden intense interest. No one wanted to witness what was coming. No one wanted to be the next example. Riley felt the weight of his hydrospanner in his hand. For a fleeting moment, he imagined bringing it down on Vorgan's skull. The thought was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold calculus of survival. 6 enforcers in the room. Security systems. Nowhere to run. He thought again of the burning platform, of the choices that had led him here, of becoming exactly what he despised, someone who looked the other way. Vorgan dragged her toward the detention block at the far end of the bay. He shoved her into a cramped holding cell, its heavy barred door looking like it belonged in a high-security prison. The metal enclosure was barely large enough for a being her size to stand upright, let alone move comfortably. "Maybe a few days without food will teach you to appreciate your position," Vorgan snarled, slamming the heavy barred door shut with a clang that echoed through the bay like a death knell. He secured it with a magnetic clamp that hissed with finality as it locked into place. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," Vorgan called out, his voice carrying through the bay. "Everything on this station belongs to me. Everything and everyone." Riley watched, his hand tightening around the hydraulic cutter he was holding. The tool suddenly felt heavy in his grip, a potential weapon rendered useless by his own cowardice. This wasn't his fight. It was never his fight. He was just a mechanic, trying to stay alive, trying to stay invisible. But then the girl turned, and her eyes found his through the bars of the cell. They were a startling violet, beautiful but cold, filled not with fear or resignation, but with a burning hatred so intense it seemed to lower the temperature of the entire bay. Those eyes held Riley's for what felt like an eternity. There was no pleading in them, no desperate hope, just judgment, cold and merciless judgment for the man who watched and did nothing. The memory hit him with physical force, the same look in the eyes of the soldiers he'd finally reached on that burning platform. "What took you so long?" they had asked without speaking. "Why did you let the others die?" When Vorgan finally left, Riley felt as though he could breathe again, but the weight of the girl's gaze remained, pressing down on him like the gravity of a gas giant. He tried to focus on his work, to lose himself in the familiarity of hydraulics and machinery, but his hands trembled slightly, making the calibration more difficult than it should have been. Time passed. The station's artificial lighting dimmed to simulate night cycle. Most of the crew had retired to their quarters or moved to the recreation deck. The cargo bay was silent except for the constant background noise of the ancient station systems. Riley finished his repairs and packed his tools, ready to return to his temporary quarters. But something stopped him. The image of those violet eyes burning with hatred wouldn't leave him. With a sigh of resignation, he detoured to the galley, filled a flask with clean water, and returned to the cargo bay. He approached the cell cautiously, checking for surveillance cameras. Vorgan's security system was old but extensive. Riley had learned its blind spots during his time on the station. He moved through them with practiced ease, still paranoid about being seen. As he neared the corner where the prisoner was kept, a voice called out from the shadows. "What are you doing down here, mechanic?" One of Vorgan's security officers stepped into view, hand resting on his holstered blaster. "Shift's over." Riley raised his hand slightly, showing he was unarmed. "Just checking the environmental regulator. Had some weird readings earlier." He gestured vaguely toward a nearby control panel. The guard's eyes narrowed. "At this hour? Better than having life support fail while everyone's sleeping," Riley said with a casual shrug. Vorgan made it clear he doesn't like being woken up for preventable problems. The mention of their captain's temper seemed to convince the guard. He nodded grudgingly. "Make it quick." Riley waited until the guard's footsteps faded before approaching the cell again. The blue-skinned girl sat in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on some distant point. She didn't acknowledge Riley's approach. "You should drink," he said, his voice rough from disuse. He set the flask down just outside the bars, within reach if she stretched her arm through. She didn't move, didn't even look at him. The silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and accusing. After what seemed like an eternity, Her voice cut through the silence, soft but sharp as broken glass. He who sees evil and does nothing is its accomplice. The word struck Riley like a physical blow. He flinched, taking an involuntary step back. Is that what they teach you on Kalen Prime? He asked, surprising himself with the bitterness in his voice. That the universe divides so neatly into heroes and villains? She turned to him then, her violet eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. They teach us that indifference is the ally of oppression. And what would you have me do? Riley hissed, keeping his voice low. Attack Vorgan with a wrench? Die pointlessly? Death with purpose is better than life without meaning, she replied calmly, as if quoting a sacred text. Riley laughed, a harsh sound without humor. I've seen people die with purpose. Their purpose was to increase quarterly profits for executives who never knew their names. The universe doesn't care about your martyrdom. Then why are you here? She asked, nodding toward the flask of water. Why risk punishment to bring comfort to a stranger? If nothing matters, why bother at all? There was no answer he could give. She was right. He had survived this long by being exactly that, an accomplice to the galaxy's casual cruelty. By looking the other way, by focusing on his tools and his trades and nothing else. Yet here he was, breaking his own rules. I listen, she said simply. While your kind sees me as cargo, I see everything. I hear everything. Without another word, Riley turned to leave. The silence felt heavier than before, pressing down on him like the vacuum of space itself. He was nearly at the door when her voice reached him again, soft but clear. Good luck with your escape plan, Riley. The maintenance shaft behind Storage Bay 12 isn't as unmonitored as you think. He froze, hand clenching involuntarily around his toolkit. His escape route, the one he'd spent months mapping, the one no one should have known about, spoken aloud so casually. He turned back, but Elia had retreated to the corner of her cell, eyes closed, seemingly indifferent to his presence. He didn't see her fingers reaching through the bars for the water he'd left after he was gone. Sleep eluded Riley that night. He lay on his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, the girl's words echoing in his mind. Accomplice. The word followed him into restless dreams, where violet eyes watched him from the shadows. Morning cycle found him back in the cargo bay, checking the station's environmental systems. A routine job, simple diagnostics. He'd promised Vorgan he'd have it done before midday. The girl, Ilya, was awake, watching him with those unnerving violet eyes. The flask he'd left was empty, sitting neatly by the bars. Their gazes met briefly before Riley looked away, focusing on the environmental diagnostic panel. There's unusual activity on the long-range scanners, he said without looking at her, keeping his voice low. 3 ships, running dark. They've been shadowing our position for the last 6 hours. You reported it? Elia asked. Riley nodded. To Vorgan's second in command? He said it was probably just asteroid miners. And you don't believe that? It wasn't a question. Riley glanced at her, then back to his work. Miners don't run with their transponders off, and they don't maintain a tactical formation. The Dawn Collective, Elia said quietly, they've come for me. Riley's hands stilled over the diagnostic panel. Who are they? Freedom fighters, liberators, a pause, or terrorists, depending on your perspective. And which is it? Riley asked. Elia's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Both. Neither. They fight against Imperial control, but their methods are extreme. Why would they come for you specifically? She didn't answer immediately, and Riley thought she might ignore the question. Finally, she said, I carry information, coordinates for a weapons cache that could turn the tide of the resistance. Riley swore under his breath. No wonder Vorgan has you locked up. Do you have any idea what he could get for that information? Yes, she said calmly, which is why I'll die before I give it to him. Riley was about to respond when the station's sensors picked up what he'd been dreading. 3 ships dropping out of FTL travel, weapons hot. He was deep in the guts of a climate control panel when the first explosion rocked the station. Alarms blared as the Dawn Collective's ships opened fire on the rust bucket. The station's outdated shields flared to life, absorbing the initial barrage, but the ancient systems weren't designed to withstand a sustained attack from multiple vessels. All hands to battle stations! Vorgan's voice crackled over the intercom. Engineering team, reroute power to the forward shields. The cargo bay erupted into chaos. Crew members scrambled for weapons or escape pods. A support beam crashed down from the ceiling, crushing a Deveronian technician who didn't move quickly enough. Electrical fires broke out as power conduits ruptured under the strain. A second explosion, closer this time, sent unsecured cargo crashing across the bay. Riley was thrown against the console he'd been working on. A shower of sparks erupted from the panel, searing his arm. He cried out, clutching the burned limb to his chest. Through the smoke and confusion, he spotted two of Vorgan's enforcers moving toward Elia's cell with weapons drawn. Their intentions were clear: eliminate the valuable prisoner rather than let her be rescued. Without thinking, Riley grabbed a length of pipe that had broken loose from the ceiling and charged. His years of military training took over. The first enforcer went down with a strike to the back of the knee. The second turned, bringing his blaster to bear, but Riley was already inside his guard. A sharp blow to the solar plexus doubled the man over, and a final strike to the base of the skull put him down. Riley stood over the unconscious bodies, breathing hard. The soldier he'd tried to bury suddenly resurfaced. When he looked up, Elia was watching him with newfound interest. "You've had combat training," she observed. Before Riley could respond, the station shuddered under another impact, this one more devastating than the last. "The main power conduit is overloaded," someone shouted over the comm channel. "We're losing shields. Another direct hit and we'll breach." Through the haze of pain, Riley saw Elia standing at the bars of her cell, pointing urgently. "The auxiliary line," she called, her voice clear and commanding. "Behind the main coolant pipe." "You can redirect the flow." Riley hesitated. Trust a prisoner? But the station shuddered under another impact, and he had no better options. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his arm. Following her direction, he sliced through a service panel with his cutter. Inside was exactly the junction she had described. "The red and blue couplings," she instructed, her eyes intent on his work. "Disconnect them, then reconnect them to the tertiary outlet." "That junction is live," Riley shouted back. "It's carrying enough current to stop my heart." "You have 3 seconds before the surge protector kicks in," Elia replied calmly. "More than enough time if you don't hesitate." Her knowledge of the station's systems was impressive, her instructions precise. Riley's hands moved quickly, following her guidance. The moment he touched the exposed coupling, electricity arced up his arm, sending agony through his body. He gritted his teeth and completed the connection. He managed to reroute the power just as the primary shields failed. The backup system kicked in, absorbing a direct hit that would have torn the cargo bay open to the void. The station stabilized, at least temporarily. Riley stumbled back to Elia's cell, clutching his burned arm. "How did you know that?" he asked, bewildered. "Those schematics aren't even in the station's main database." "I was an engineer," she said, "before I became a revolutionary. I designed systems like this for the Imperial fleet." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Ironic that my work now protects those who enslave me." Riley nodded slowly, then tossed his medkit through the bars. "For your burns," he said, noticing for the first time that she too had been injured in the chaos. She caught the small kit with surprising grace. Instead of tending to her own injury, however, she tore a strip from her already tattered tunic. "Your arm needs attention first," she said, reaching through the bars. Hesitantly, Riley moved closer, allowing her to wrap his burned forearm with a firm, practiced touch. Their eyes met through the bars, and in that moment of shared pain and danger, something shifted between them. "I'm Riley," he said, watching her work. Her violet eyes flicked up to his face briefly. "Elia," she replied, securing the makeshift bandage. "Though Vorgan prefers savage or property." The bay had emptied of most personnel. In the lull between attacks, they were alone in a bubble of relative calm amid the chaos of the besieged station. "Why are you helping me?" Riley asked, flexing his bandaged arm. "I've done nothing for you." Elia's expression softened slightly. "You brought me water when you didn't have to." "In my culture, water sharing is sacred." She paused. "Besides, we're both trapped here. Survival creates strange alliances." The moment was interrupted by a groan from one of the enforcers Riley had taken down. The man was regaining consciousness, hand inching toward his fallen weapon. In one fluid motion, Riley kicked the blaster away and knocked the enforcer unconscious again with a precise strike. He picked up the weapon, checking its charge level before tucking it into his belt. "You move like a soldier," Elia observed. "I was," Riley admitted, Corporate security force. I got out. Did you? Or did you just change masters? The question hung in the air between them, challenging and profound. Before Riley could formulate an answer, a different alarm cut through the momentary quiet, higher pitched and more urgent than the battle klaxons. Vorgan's voice crackled over the station's intercom again, cold and furious. They're targeting the engines, the slaver captain announced. I'm jettisoning the cargo bay to lighten our mass for an escape jump. 5 minutes to full separation and decompression. The words hit Riley like a bucket of ice water. Jettisoning the cargo bay wasn't just a tactical decision, it was an execution. Vorgan was cutting loose not only dead weight, but also evidence and potential witnesses. 2 birds with 1 stone. Panic erupted among the few crew members remaining in the bay. They scrambled for the exits, abandoning their posts in a desperate bid to reach safety. Within seconds, Riley and Aaliyah were alone. The massive bay doors began to close, sealing off their escape route. A large timer appeared on a wall monitor, its red numbers starting at 5 a.m. and counting down with merciless precision. Riley ran to Aaliyah's cell. I'll get you out, he promised, igniting his hydraulic cutter. The tool's jaws glowed white-hot as he pressed it against the magnetic lock. Metal screamed in protest. The cutter sparked dangerously, its jaws groaning against the hardened alloy. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. Then the motor died with a pathetic whine, damaged in the earlier explosion. It's not working, Riley yelled, slamming his fist against the unyielding bars. The timer on the wall now showed 2:17. I can't cut through it. He scrambled to find another solution, grabbing a fallen length of pipe to use as a makeshift pry bar. The metal bent under his efforts, but the cell door didn't budge. The lock was military-grade, designed to contain far stronger creatures than a human. Riley, a voice called from the bay entrance. An older alien with 6 limbs and milky eyes, Dorvin, the station's chief engineer, appeared with a plasma torch in hand. I saw the alert. What's happening? Vorgan's jettisoning the bay, Riley explained quickly. With us in it. Help me get this cell open. Dorvin moved with surprising speed for his age, firing up the plasma torch. Not on my watch, not you. Riley felt a pang at the old alien's words. Dorvin had been more than a mentor. He was the one who'd smuggled Riley onto Rust Bucket 3 years ago when Riley was half dead, fleeing corporate assassins. The one who'd vouched for him, given him a cover identity, taught him the station's systems. The access code might, Dorvin began. The blue-white flame of the plasma torch bit into the lock mechanism, melting through the outer layer. The timer showed 1:35. It's working, Riley exclaimed. A blaster shot echoed through the bay. Dorvin staggered forward, a smoking hole in his chest. Behind him stood one of Vorgan's loyal enforcers, weapons still raised. Captain's orders, the enforcer said coldly. No survivors. Riley ducked as a second shot screamed past his head. He rolled, coming up with the blaster he'd taken earlier, and returned fire. His shot caught the enforcer in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man fell but was still moving. The plasma torch had fallen from Dorvin's lifeless hands, its flame dying out. Riley grabbed it, but the damage was too severe. The power cell had been hit by a stray blast. Dorvin, Riley whispered, kneeling beside the alien's body. 6 milky eyes stared unseeing at the ceiling. The being who had saved Riley's life, given him a second chance, sacrificed to Vorgan's cruelty. You were right, Riley said, voice breaking. I should have left months ago, taken you with me. It was too late now. His only friend on the station was gone. The timer showed 0058. He was going to die here. They both were. Because his tool, his one skill, had failed him when it mattered most, and the one person who might have saved them was gone. The red light of the emergency klaxon washed over the bay, pulsing in time with the countdown, marking their final moments with its crimson glow. Elia watched Riley, her face a mask of grim resolve. Something changed in her expression as she witnessed his desperation, his willingness to stay with her until the end rather than save himself, his grief over the fallen alien. You saved the station, she said, her voice suddenly ringing with a strange new power. I will save us. She stepped back to the rear of the cell, as far from the door as the small space allowed. She rolled her shoulders, flexed her hands. Riley noticed for the first time how muscular her forearms were beneath her slender appearance. Stand back, she commanded. She took a deep, shuddering breath. In that moment, Ilya's mind flashed back to her youth on Kalen Prime, to the sacred training grounds where young warriors learned the ancient martial art of Tirvok. She saw again her mentor, the battle-scarred veteran who had recognized her potential. "The breaking fist is our final defense," the old warrior had told her. "It comes at great cost. The bones in your arm will shatter. The pain will be considerable. Use it only when all other options are exhausted." She had practiced the form thousands of times, but never with intent. Never with the biokinetic energy that made it more than just a physical technique. Doing so would have permanently damaged her arm, perhaps ended her career as an engineer before it began. But now, with the timer showing 0034 and death approaching, what was there to lose? Riley remembered stories he'd heard about the Kalen race. They had evolved on a high-gravity world with armored predators. Their bone structure, particularly in the forearms, was unnaturally dense, capable of delivering shattering blows. It was a biological trait they rarely displayed, a last resort weapon. With a warrior's cry that seemed to shake the very air, Elia lunged forward. Her fist, a blur of blue, struck the heavy magnetic lock on the cell door. The impact was a contained thunderclap. The hardened alloy around the lock didn't just break. It exploded outward in a shower of metal shards. The door, torn from its mangled hinges by the sheer force of the blow, crashed inward. A guttural scream of agony tore from Elia's throat as she stumbled forward. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle, the bones visibly shattered beneath the blue skin. White fragments protruded through in multiple places, blood seeping around them. The breaking fist had not just damaged her arm, it had obliterated it from wrist to elbow. Riley stared in horror at the self-inflicted devastation. This was no temporary injury. Even with advanced medical treatment, her arm would never be the same. She had permanently crippled herself for their freedom. Through gritted teeth and tears of pain, Elia managed one word: run. The timer showed 0029. Riley grabbed the blaster from the floor with one hand and Elia's uninjured arm with the other. They sprinted for the bay doors, which had nearly closed completely. Riley dove through first, pulling Elia after him. They tumbled into the corridor beyond, just as the massive doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss. "The bridge!" Riley gasped, struggling to his feet. "We need to get to the bridge." Together they raced through the twisting corridors of the rust bucket. Emergency lights flashed around them, and the station shuddered with each new impact from the attacking vessel. Crew members rushed past them, too focused on their own survival to pay attention to an escaped prisoner. "The cargo bay's been jettisoned," a voice announced over the comm system. "Preparing for jump." Through a viewport, Riley caught a glimpse of the detached cargo bay drifting away from the station. Dorvan's body was still in there, along with the unconscious enforcer. A moment later, enemy fire struck the separated section, and it exploded in a blinding flash. The shock wave buffeted the station, sending them staggering against the corridor wall. Elia grimaced as her injured arm hit the metal bulkhead. "We need to hurry," she panted. "If they jump to hyperspace, the Dawn Collective will pursue. They'll destroy this entire station to get what I know." They reached the bridge just as Vorgan initiated the final jump sequence. The bridge was in chaos, crew members shouting contradictory orders as the station systems flashed warning after warning. Through the main viewport, 3 sleek attack vessels could be seen, their weapons glowing as they prepared another salvo. Vorgan whirled at the sound of their entrance, his face contorting with rage when he saw Elia standing free. "You!" he snarled, reaching for the blaster at his hip. "How?" Before he could draw the weapon, the station's main view screen flickered to life. The face of the rival faction's commander appeared, features twisted in a victorious sneer. "Surrender the Kalen dissident, Vorgan," the commander demanded. His dark uniform bore the insignia of the Dawn Collective, a rising sun pierced by a sword. "We know she's aboard your station. Hand her over, and we might let you live." All eyes turned to Elia, who stood tall despite her tattered clothing, her injured arm, and the bruises visible on her blue skin. Vorgan's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Take her," he said, gesturing toward Elia. "She's more trouble than she's worth." The Dawn Collective commander's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Just like that? No negotiations for a higher price?" "Consider it a professional courtesy," Vorgan said smoothly. "Besides, a worthless savage who can't even stay behind a locked door. What use is she to me? The commander nodded, satisfied. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. Riley stepped forward, positioning himself between Elia and Vorgan. No, he said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Vorgan's eyes widened in disbelief. What did you say, mechanic? I said no, Riley repeated, louder this time. He raised the blaster, aiming it at Vorgan's chest. She's not going with them. She's not staying with you. She's free to choose her own path. The bridge crew froze, watching the standoff with bated breath. Vorgan's hand inched toward his own weapon. You're throwing your life away for a slave, Vorgan said softly. I always knew you were smarter than you pretended to be, but I didn't think you were this stupid. Elia moved to stand beside Riley, her violet eyes meeting his with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Despite her injured arm, she radiated a fierce determination. Worthless savage, Vorgan spat over the comm, his voice dripping with contempt as he addressed the enemy commander. Couldn't even break a simple lock without help from this mechanic. Elia stepped in front of Riley, shielding him with her body. Her eyes no longer filled with hatred, but with a fierce, protective fire, locked on Vorgan. That savage is my future husband, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. The bridge fell silent. Riley's heart pounded in his ears. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew with sudden clarity that his life had just changed irrevocably. Vorgan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Your husband? This coward mechanic? Among my people, Elia said, addressing everyone present, one who saves your life 3 times is bound to you by sacred law. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting Riley's. He brought me water when I was thirsty. He helped me save the station. He tried to free me from the cell at the risk of his own life. The Dawn Collective commander's face darkened on the view screen. Is this true? He demanded. One of his officers leaned in to whisper something in his ear. The commander's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. The Kalen marriage bond, the officer said, loud enough for the comm to pick up. It's their most sacred custom, recognized throughout the sector as inviolable, even by the Galactic Convention. Riley stood silently at Elia's side, his expression resolute. The blaster in his hand never wavered from Vorgan. His silence spoke volumes. A warrior's support, not a word needed. This changes nothing, the commander insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. The information you carry will remain with me, Elia said firmly, and with my protector. When the time is right, the resistance will receive it through channels of our choosing. A tense silence followed. The Dawn Collective ships maintained their position, weapons still trained on the station. Then reluctantly, the commander nodded. So be it. The view screen went dark as the rival ships broke off their attack and began to withdraw. Vorgan's face contorted with fury. You think this changes anything? He hissed. You're still on my station. You're still... His words were cut short as Elia's fist connected with his jaw. Despite her injured arm, she moved with lightning speed, her left hand striking with precision at the vulnerable point where jaw met skull. The sound of bone cracking echoed across the bridge. Vorgan crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Silence fell again, broken only by the beeping of console indicators and the distant sound of damage control teams working throughout the station. The bridge crew stared at their fallen captain, then at the unlikely pair standing over him. Anyone else? Riley asked quietly, the blaster still in his hand. One by one, the crew members looked away, shaking their heads. The captain made enemies of 2 different factions in one day, said a tall, scarred woman who had been operating the navigation console, and nearly got us all killed in the process. I think we're overdue for new management. Murmurs of agreement spread through the bridge crew. Years of Vorgan's cruelty and incompetence had built a reservoir of resentment that was finally finding release. What happens now? Asked a young technician, looking nervously between Riley, Elia, and the unconscious form of Vorgan. Riley looked at Elia, uncertain. This wasn't how he had expected the day to end. She met his gaze, and despite the pain she must have been feeling from her shattered arm, she managed a small, reassuring smile. First, she said, turning to address the crew, we get this station operational again. Then we decide what kind of place it will become. And him? The navigator nudged Vorgan with her boot. Secure him in the brig, Riley said. Once we've stabilized the station, We'll drop him at the nearest outpost to face charges for his slave trading. 2 crew members dragged Vorgan away, none too gently. The rest returned to their stations with a new sense of purpose. The tension that had permeated the bridge under Vorgan's rule was already beginning to dissipate. Riley looked at Elia and saw not just a fierce warrior or a clever strategist, but a future he'd never dared to imagine for himself. "Did you mean it?" she asked softly when they were relatively alone near the main viewport. "About being bound to me?" Riley thought about his life before this moment. The endless wandering from job to job, station to station, the loneliness, the emptiness of being just a mechanic, just a set of skills for hire. "Yes," he said simply, "if you'll have me." A smile, the first he'd seen from her, transformed Elia's face. It was like watching a star being born. "Then by the laws of my people, we are bound," she said, taking his hand in hers. Her touch was gentle now, so different from the devastating force she had unleashed on the cell door and on Vorgan. "But there is something you should know." Riley waited, suddenly apprehensive. "The information I carry," she said in a lower voice, "it's not just weapons coordinates. It's the location of a Kalan sanctuary world, a planet beyond Imperial space where my people have established a colony. Thousands of refugees have already found safety there." "That's what the Dawn Collective wanted? A refugee location?" Elia's expression hardened. "They would have used it to force my people into their war. The Collective may fight the Empire, but their methods have become nearly as brutal. They would have turned a sanctuary into a military base, conscripted my people into their army." Riley nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what she had protected. "What will you do with the information now?" "Share it with those who need it most," she said. "There are still thousands of Kalan trapped under Imperial rule, but we'll need to be careful. Establish secure channels. Build a network." "From here?" Riley asked, gesturing around the bridge of the battered trading station. Elia looked thoughtful. "Why not? A trading post at the edge of Imperial space. The perfect cover for a rescue operation." Riley felt a smile spreading across his face. It had been a long time since he'd had a purpose greater than survival. A cause worth fighting for. "I think Rust Bucket 7 is due for a name change." Over the next few hours, the station began the slow process of recovery. Damage control teams worked to repair breached sections. Medical staff treated the injured. Riley used his engineering skills to stabilize the overtaxed systems, making improvements as he went, no longer hiding his true capabilities. Elia, her arm now properly set and bandaged by the station's medical droid, organized the remaining crew into efficient teams. Her natural leadership abilities, combined with her engineering knowledge, quickly earned her the respect of even the most skeptical crew members. As the immediate crisis passed, Riley found her in what had been Vorgan's private quarters, now converted into an impromptu command center. Star charts and data pads covered the desk where she worked one-handed, plotting routes that would take the newly renamed station, Haven Point, beyond the reach of both Imperial patrols and Dawn Collective raids. "The long-range sensors are back online," Riley reported, "and I've boosted their range by 30%. Elia looked up from her work, a tired smile lighting her features. "Good. We'll need the extra warning time if we're going to make this work." Through the viewport, not one but 3 Dawn Collective ships lingered at the edge of sensor range. They hadn't left entirely, instead forming a blockade position. Not quite an attack formation, but far from a peaceful withdrawal. "They're still out there," Riley observed, tension evident in his voice. "All of them." "And more coming," Elia said grimly, pointing to a readout on the sensor display. 2 additional signatures had appeared at the edge of their detection range. "They're calling in reinforcements." "Because of the marriage bond?" "Because they know what I know is worth risking interstellar incident for," she said. "They've given us a reprieve, not a pardon." Riley studied the tactical display. The Dawn Collective ships were positioned to cut off all major hyperspace routes from their location. "They're settling in for a siege." Elia nodded. "We have perhaps 3 days before they make another attempt, either through infiltration or direct assault." 3 days to prepare," Riley said, determination hardening his features. 3 days to turn this broken station into a fortress. Riley moved closer, leaning against the desk beside her. "And what about us? This bond, is it real? Or just a convenient fiction to escape a bad situation?" Elia set down the data pad and rose to face him. Among my people, marriage isn't a ceremony or a document. It's a choice made and remade each day. Her uninjured hand reached up to touch his face. I chose you in that moment on the bridge. The question is, will you choose me again tomorrow and the day after? Riley covered her hand with his own. I will, he said, realizing as he spoke that he meant it. For as long as you'll have me. Her violet eyes searched his face, no longer cold with judgment, but warm with something new. Trust, perhaps. Maybe even the beginnings of affection. We should make our new partnership official to the crew, she suggested. They need to see us united if this transition is going to work. Riley nodded. I'll call a meeting in the main hall for 1800 hours. By then, the worst of the damage should be under control. As they prepared to leave the command center, the station's comm system chimed with an incoming transmission. The view screen activated to show a weathered human face, an independent trader who occasionally did business with Vorgan. Rust Bucket 7, this is Captain Merrick of the Wayward Star, the trader said, requesting docking permission for supply delivery. Riley glanced at Aaliyah, who gave a slight nod. Captain Merrick, Riley replied. This is Riley Crawford, acting administrator of Haven Point. We'll clear you for docking bay 3. The trader's eyebrows rose at the new name and new face, but he was wise enough not to ask questions over an open channel. Acknowledged, Haven Point. Approaching docking bay 3. As the transmission ended, Aaliyah turned to Riley with an amused expression. Acting administrator? Riley shrugged. Had to call it something. And Haven Point? It seemed fitting, he said. This place was hell under Vorgan. Maybe now it can be something better. A sanctuary. A haven. Elia nodded approvingly. I like it. She moved toward the door, then paused. You know this won't be easy. The Empire will come looking eventually. The Dawn Collective won't give up, and there may be members of Vorgan's crew still loyal to him. I know, Riley said, but for the first time in years, I'm not just surviving. I'm fighting for something that matters. He joined her at the door. Besides, I've got the most dangerous Kalen in the sector as my wife. How bad could it be? Her laughter, unexpected and musical, filled the room. Another first. Together they made their way to the bridge to begin the next chapter of their improbable alliance. The mechanic who had found his courage, the prisoner who had found her freedom, and in each other they had found a purpose neither had dared to imagine. Beyond the viewport, a new ship appeared on the horizon, its running lights blinking as it approached the station. Not Dawn Collective, not Imperial. The independent trader bringing supplies, possibly information, certainly complications. The first test of many for the fledgling leadership of Haven Point. What now? Riley asked, his arm around Elia's shoulders as they watched the approaching vessel. She leaned into him, her shattered arm carefully suspended in a medical regeneration field, the bones painfully realigning with the help of nanites. The medics had been clear. She would regain function, but never full strength. The price of freedom was permanently etched into her body. Now, she said, taking his free hand in hers, we build our future. Together. Beyond the viewport, the formation of Dawn Collective ships shifted, adjusting their blockade pattern as a sixth vessel joined their ranks. On the tactical display, warning indicators flashed. Weapons powering up, shields at maximum. The approaching trader ship signaled urgently for docking permission. A new chapter was about to begin, and it would be written in fire.